It started with a ring. Not an explosion, not a hack, not a digital war, just a single, harmless ringtone echoing inside a quiet suburban home in Ohio. On the other end of that call was a calm, polite voice with a faint accent. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm calling from the Internal Revenue Service. There seems to be an issue with your tax file." The voice was steady, confident, and just formal enough to sound real. 15 minutes later, $9,400 had vanished from her bank account. The call ended, but the nightmare had just begun. What that Ohio grandmother did not know, what millions of Americans still do not tease, that she had not fallen victim to a random prank or an isolated crime. She had just become one of millions trapped in an invisible empire of deception. A $10 billion global machine built on fear, technology, and greed. Before we dive into how this voice on the phone became one of America's most dangerous scams, tell me one thing. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? And if you love scam documentaries that uncover real stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story like this one. Because what you are about to hear will make you question every phone call you have ever answered. The story begins far from Ohio, across the ocean in a city that never truly sleeps, Gurugram, India. A skyline of glass towers, packed with call centers that look legitimate on the outside, but hide dark operations within. Behind one of those unmarked doors, rows of young men and women sit in tiny cubicles. Headsets pressed tight, screens glowing with stolen data. They call themselves closers. Their job is simple: find Americans, scare them, and take everything they can. Their scripts are rehearsed like stage plays. Every word, every pause, every breath is calculated. Sir, this is a very serious matter. You could be arrested today if we don't verify your information. To the person on the other end of the line, the caller sounds like an authority figure. To the scammer, it's just another shift. Between 2014 and 2022, over 70,000 Americans reported losing money to call center scams. The total, more than $10 billion. Those are only the reported cases. Experts estimate the real number could be twice as high. Some victims lost a few $100s, others their entire life savings. One retired teacher from California wired $247,000 to a man claiming to be an FBI agent. A widower in Florida transferred $500,000 to secure his accounts from a fake government investigation. Different names, different stories. One result: empty bank accounts and broken lives. Inside the call centers, scams were treated like business. Recruits learned soft skills: how to sound American, how to show empathy, how to build trust. They practiced accents, studied real U.S. customer service calls, and memorized fraud scenarios that would terrify anyone unfamiliar with digital crime. Their workspaces were lined with motivational posters that read like twisted jokes. Fear closes deals. Every call counts. Quota is king. Above them sat the true masterminds, the kingpins. They owned multiple call centers spread across India, Dubai, and the Philippines. They had fleets of cars, mansions, and offshore accounts. They supplied the data millions of American phone numbers, names, and social security details bought on the dark web. At 9 a.m. sharp, they shouted across the floor, "Hit your quota." A good scammer could earn $5,000 to $10,000 a day. Multiply that by hundreds of callers, and you have a billion-dollar scam empire. Most victims fell into three groups: seniors trusting, less tech-savvy, and more financially stable; middle-aged Americans worried about taxes or debt; and young adults lured in by tech support or refund scams. The tactics were psychological warfare. Scammers mirrored the victim's tone, used silence as a weapon, and created fake urgency. Their goal wasn't just to convince, it was to dominate emotionally. In one infamous case, a woman in Texas stayed on the phone for 6 straight hours. The scammer, pretending to be from Microsoft, told her hackers had taken control of her computer. He guided her through a series of steps, gaining remote access, and accidentally refunded her too much money at $1,000 instead of $800. Terrified, she followed his instructions, buying gift cards and reading the codes allowed to return the fake excess. By the time she hung up, she was broke and humiliated. By 2018, the U.S. government had finally connected the dots. Complaints were flooding the Federal Trade Commission, the IRS, and local law enforcement. A joint task force operation outsource was launched with Indian authorities. Raids swept across call centers in Mumbai and Delhi. Hundreds were arrested. Computers, scripts, and cash were seized. For a moment, it looked like the empire had fallen. But scammers are survivors. Within months, new centers popped up, smarter and more sophisticated. This time, the threats were replaced with refunds. Victims received calls claiming to offer reimbursements for fake subscriptions or overcharges. "Sir, we accidentally charged your account twice. Please click the link so we can refund the difference." When the victim complied, the scammer gained full control of their computer. They shifted money between accounts to simulate errors, then demanded repayment for the false over-refund. It was the perfect con, turning the victim into an unwitting criminal in their own mind. In one intercepted call later used as evidence in court, a scammer shouted at an elderly man who hesitated to pay, "Sir, if you don't send the payment now, your bank will freeze your account." The old man apologized, trembling, begging the stranger not to let that happen. Meanwhile, across America, the psychological toll deepened. Local police could do little. These crimes were being committed halfway around the world. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center reported over 800,000 fraud cases in 1 year, with total losses exceeding $10 billion. The scams evolved faster than the authorities could keep up. Fake Amazon refunds, fake Social Security updates, fake Medicare renewals, even fake grandchild emergencies. One former scammer recorded his boss bragging about their success. "We make more money from America than most companies here. They can't stop us, they're too far away." That recording triggered another international investigation. But before it did, the scam reached unimaginable scale. Thousands of calls per day, millions of dollars per week. And then came one call that changed everything. The next victim they targeted wasn't a retiree, or a student, or a nervous taxpayer. It was an undercover FBI agent. The agent answered, played along, and slowly traced the call back to its source. What followed would expose an entire criminal network stretching from U.S. soil to international borders. The hunt for the kingpins was about to begin. The building didn't look suspicious. It stood tall in Gurugram's business district, its glass facade reflecting the morning light like a mirror. To anyone passing by, it looked like another ordinary outsourcing firm, a place where young professionals answered customer service calls for companies abroad. But inside, beneath the hum of air conditioners and clicking keyboards, the atmosphere was entirely different. This was not customer service. This was a factory of fear. Rows of cubicles stretched across the room, each one occupied by a headset-wearing worker with their eyes fixed on a glowing monitor. The air buzzed with overlapping voices, each caller pretending to be someone else: an IRS agent, a bank officer, a customer care representative. The calls sounded official, professional, convincing. But they weren't real. They were weapons. The employees were mostly in their 20s. Some were college dropouts looking for quick money. Others were graduates who couldn't find better jobs. For most of them, morality had become a luxury they couldn't afford. Their training lasted a week, 5 days of learning fake scripts, fake identities, and the psychology of fear. They were taught how to control tone, how to mimic empathy, how to sound American. Mistakes were corrected harshly. Successes were celebrated loudly. By the time training ended, they were transformed from nervous recruits into polished manipulators. Every morning, their shift began with a ritual. The floor manager would shout, "Let's make money," and the room erupted in applause. New scripts were distributed daily. Sometimes they were impersonating IRS agents demanding unpaid taxes. Other days, they posed as tech support workers claiming a virus had infected the victim's computer. No matter the script, the goal was the same: to make the victim panic enough to pay. The manager's voice echoed through the intercom. Fear closes deals. Emotion equals conversion. Remember that? The workday was relentless. Callers made hundreds of outbound calls each day, dialing American numbers from databases purchased on the dark web. Many were labeled with frightening precision: retired, senior citizen. Low digital literacy. These were their targets: people most likely to trust authority, most vulnerable to fear. A young man named Arjun recalled his first day vividly. "At first, I was shaking," he said. "I didn't want to do it. When I made my first $400 in commission, I stopped thinking about right and wrong. It became a game. The more I earned, the less I cared." His story was common. By the end of their first month, even the most hesitant recruits had learned to suppress guilt. Empathy was bad for business. Supervisors roamed between desks, listening in on live calls through split headsets. They corrected accents, whispered suggestions, and jumped in to help close deals. When someone succeeded in extracting a large payment, the entire floor erupted in cheers. Bells rang, applause thundered. That closer received a cash bonus on the spot. The sound of celebration drowned out whatever faint conscience might have remained. Behind the floor was a glass office that overlooked the operation. Inside sat the owner's sharp suit, expensive watch, phone in one hand, whiskey in the other. To his employees, he was known only as the boss. His real name never appeared on any documents. He controlled 3 other centers across India and had partners in Dubai and Manila. The money flowed through wire transfers, prepaid cards, and cryptocurrency wallets. On his desk were 2 monitors, one tracking daily earnings, the other showing live call metrics. Every number represented another frightened American. He once told an employee, "America pays better than any country." Their fear is expensive. Each scam type had its own team. One handled IRS impersonations, using threats of jail time to extract payments. Another team managed tech support scams, convincing people their computers were infected. A third group specialized in refund scams, promising reimbursements for expired warranties or subscription services. The most recent addition was the Amazon department, targeting shoppers by warning them of suspicious purchases. Each department followed a strict formula: build trust, create fear, offer a way out. The scripts were masterpieces of psychological manipulation. They began gently. With reassurance, "I'm just here to help you." Then came urgency. "You must act now before it's too late." Finally, the fear: "If we don't resolve this legal action, we'll begin immediately." The progression was carefully designed to disarm logic. Victims who hesitated were transferred to senior officers who intensified the pressure. Once the payment was made, the call was disconnected and the victim's number was flagged as closed. For those working the phones, this wasn't a scam, it was a career. Many earned in a month what an average Indian worker made in a year. Some bought cars, others paid for lavish apartments and weekend trips. A few even bragged about sending their siblings to college with money stolen from Americans. To them, the victims were faceless voices, not people. The more money they made, the less real those voices became, but not everyone celebrated. A few began to crack under guilt. One woman, Priya, later confessed during questioning that she often muted her mic when victims cried. "Some people begged," she said. "One old man told me he was on oxygen and didn't have anyone else. I cried that night, but the next morning I went back. I needed the money." Her story wasn't unique, only unspoken. The money moved through a labyrinth. Victims were told to buy gift cards Apple, Google, or Walmart and read the codes aloud. Others were instructed to transfer money to verification accounts. These accounts belonged to American mules, people unknowingly recruited through fake job postings. From there, the money was routed through multiple layers of transactions before landing in cryptocurrency wallets. Within minutes, it disappeared into the digital ether. By 2019, the FBI had tracked dozens of these centers. They were operating under names like Global Tech Solutions and Customer Connect. They paid local taxes, had official websites, and even held corporate retreats. From the outside, they were legitimate businesses. Inside, they were criminal networks laundering millions every week. In late 2019, the U.S. Department of Justice launched Operation Call It Quits, an international crackdown on phone-based fraud. Working alongside Indian cybercrime units, they traced transactions, intercepted calls, and mapped the network's command structure. Raids were planned, but the investigation was delicate. One wrong move, and the scammers would vanish overnight, taking their servers and cash with them. The deeper the investigators dug, the clearer the picture became. At the top were a handful of kingpins operating like CEOs. Beneath them were managers, recruiters, and closers. Below them were low-level agents, hundreds of voices dialing, day and night, flooding America with fear. Together, they generated an estimated $300 million a year. Then came the breakthrough. A young employee named Deepin, tired of the lies, walked into a cybercrime office carrying a hard drive. On it were recordings, payment records, and the names of the top bosses. He had worked as a closer for nearly 2 years and had seen enough. "I couldn't sleep," he said later. "Every time I heard an old voice on the phone, I saw my own parents. That hard drive changed everything." Investigators followed the money trail from India to Dubai, then to offshore accounts in Singapore, and finally back to the US. Some of the stolen funds were even being reinvested into legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate, and tech startups. The irony was painful. Scams were funding success stories. By early 2020, law enforcement had enough evidence to strike. Surveillance footage, financial ledgers, and call recordings painted a damning picture of a vast criminal network operating under the guise of customer service. Wiretaps captured conversations between bosses bragging about their profits. One line stood out: "Old people are our gold mine. They believe everything." But before the raids could begin, something unexpected happened. One of the call centers made a mistake. The target on their screen, a man in Virginia, wasn't an ordinary victim. He was an undercover FBI agent working on the very task force assigned to dismantle them. He kept the scammer talking, tracing every digital signal, every route the call traveled through. Within minutes, agents knew exactly where the call had come from. The Empire's days were numbered. The next morning, plans changed. The raid would happen sooner than expected. Hundreds of agents moved in across multiple cities. The machine that had stolen billions through fear was finally about to meet its own. The city of Gurugram was still asleep when the convoy began to move. It was just before dawn, the streets empty, the air thick with anticipation. In a row of unmarked SUVs, officers from India's cybercrime division sat in silence, their radios crackling softly. Among them were 2 FBI agents working alongside local authorities as part of an international task force. Their destination was a 12-story office building that looked like any other modern glass exterior, a security guard half asleep at the gate, and a glowing sign that read Global Tech Solutions. But inside that building, hundreds of calls were being made to unsuspecting Americans. Each ring, each polite greeting, was another theft in progress for weeks. Investigators had traced the network. The hard drive provided by the whistleblower, Deepin, had revealed everything: scripts, call logs, bank records, and names. The kingpin, a man who called himself Rajiv, was in his office on the top floor. Every morning, he reviewed live call data from across his network centers in Noida, Hyderabad, and Mumbai, all funneling money through offshore accounts. On this particular morning, he was sipping coffee, unaware that his empire was about to end. At 4:27 a.m., the first team moved in. They surrounded the building in silence, blocking exits and cutting power to the top floors. The lead officer gave a simple command: go. Within seconds, the peace shattered. Doors burst open, shouts echoed through hallways, and dozens of agents stormed the offices. Startled employees froze mid-call, still wearing their headsets. Some tried to pull plugs or delete files. Others simply raised their hands, trembling. The floor that had once buzzed with chatter was now filled with chaos. Investigators moved quickly. They confiscated computers, seized mobile phones, and secured the servers that stored thousands of American voices. On the walls, they found what looked like motivational posters, but they weren't about teamwork or customer satisfaction. One read, "Control the fear, control the sale." Another said, "Every doubt is a lost dollar." In the break room, a whiteboard listed daily targets, with cities like Miami, Tampa, and Phoenix highlighted in red their high-conversion zones. Every detail was chillingly organized. On the top floor, agents kicked open the door to Rajiv's office. He looked up, stunned, but not panicked. He had been in this business too long to show fear. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he demanded. The officer replied calmly, "Yes. That's exactly why we're here." Within minutes, Rajiv was in handcuffs, escorted past the rows of stunned employees who had once cheered his name. On his desk, investigators found ledgers documenting over $60 million in stolen funds in just 2 years' money sent through fake tech refunds, IRS scams, and customer verification calls. The figures were staggering. As the arrests continued, the scale of the operation came into focus. There were entire floors dedicated to different scams. One specialized in Amazon refund scams, another in Medicare fraud. Some workers pretended to be from U.S. banks, others from government agencies. Dozens of fake American phone numbers were displayed on whiteboards used to trick caller ID systems. Each desk had a script binder, color-coded by scenario. When officers opened them, they found pages filled with carefully crafted dialogue, designed to manipulate every emotion: fear, guilt, relief. It wasn't improvisation, it was engineering. Across the city, similar raids unfolded simultaneously. In Noida and Hyderabad, more centers were taken down. By sunrise, over 200 people had been detained, and millions in cash, gold, and digital assets were seized. The Indian government called it one of the largest coordinated cybercrime crackdowns in the country's history. News broke across both nations: call center scam. Busted, millions stolen from U.S. citizens recovered. The footage was surreal: young men and women, once faceless voices, now standing in police lines, heads bowed. But even as headlines celebrated the victory, the real story was playing out thousands of miles away in the homes of those who had answered those calls. When the arrests hit American news, victims began reaching out to investigators. Some cried with relief, others just wanted to talk. A retired nurse from Ohio told reporters, "I lost $42,000 to those people. I thought it was my fault. For months, I couldn't tell my family. Seeing them arrested feels like I can finally breathe again." For others, the justice came too late. Families of elderly victims who had passed away still carried the weight of guilt. One man from Arizona said his mother had been so terrified after a fake IRS threat that she withdrew her savings and mailed it in cash. She believed she was doing the right thing, he said. They stole not just her money, they stole her peace. Stories like these poured in, each one a reminder that behind every statistic was a human life quietly shattered. In the days after the raid, investigators continued uncovering evidence. They found offshore accounts in Dubai, Singapore, and even Florida, tied to shell companies that disguised the flow of money. Some funds had been reinvested in real businesses, real restaurants, hotels, even real estate developments. The irony was painful. Money stolen from Americans was being used to build legitimate empires elsewhere. When questioned, many arrested employees claimed ignorance. "I didn't know it was illegal," one said. Others admitted the truth. "We knew," a young man confessed, "but everyone around us was doing it." It felt normal. A few expressed remorse, while others laughed off their actions. One of the supervisors told officers, "If they're stupid enough to fall for it, that's not my fault." His smirk would later become a viral image symbolizing the cold indifference behind the scam. Meanwhile, the cooperation between US and Indian authorities led to new policies and tighter security protocols. Major tech companies began implementing AI-driven fraud detection to identify suspicious calls. Banks improved verification systems. The US Department of Justice announced multiple extraditions of top-level scammers, some of whom faced decades in prison. For the first time, the global community was treating call center fraud not as petty theft, but as organized crime. Yet even with the arrests, experts warned that this was only a temporary victory. The demand for easy money and the accessibility of stolen data meant the scam industry would adapt, evolve, and return. Within months, new versions of the same schemes appeared, this time with AI-generated voices, spoofed video calls, and deepfake bank representatives. The battlefield had changed, but the weapon remained the same: human trust. Psychologists studying scam victims discovered something profound. The people who fell for these schemes weren't foolish or naive. They were human. Fear, authority, and urgency are primal triggers. When we feel threatened, our brain prioritizes safety over skepticism. Scammers exploit that instinct with surgical precision. One researcher described it best: "They don't steal money, they steal logic." For the FBI agents who had worked on the case, the emotional toll was heavy. One of them later told a reporter, "You can recover stolen funds, but you can't restore someone's sense of security." These scams take more than money, they take trust. That was the true cost of the crime, the one that couldn't be measured in dollars or charts. Today, despite the arrests and headlines, the phone still rings. Somewhere, a new scammer is dialing an American number, reading from a new script. The voice will sound confident, kind, maybe even helpful. It will promise safety or warn of danger. It will feel familiar. And for some unsuspecting person, that voice will become their next mistake. The call center scam may have lost its empire, but its shadow still stretches across borders and screens. The next great scam is always just one innovation away, one new fear, one new illusion, one new story waiting to be believed. So, the next time your phone rings from an unknown number, remember this story. Remember the empire of voices that once stole billions without ever leaving their desks. And ask yourself one question before you answer. What if the voice on the other end isn't there to help you at all? If you think this scam was shocking, terrifying, or darkly fascinating, just wait for what comes next. Subscribe to Scamsphere so you never miss another true story of greed, deception, and the crimes that hide in plain sight. Because somewhere out there, another voice is already dialing.